Phisano had passed out of the wastes without contest, and now an additional threat assailed him. The Scarlish, one of the 3 original tribes of the Vitritects, and known to be the most aggressive and ill-tempered. He would not have started here, if not for the fact that they were his closest neighbours. The glasswork here was immense. They had been busy. Phisano thought back to what he knew of the other tribes. The Scarlish, under the strict rule of Bromum, were warmongers, fighters, not creators. The people of Viola, on the other hand, a far region to the south, were said to be among the most creative. They saw Lodum, an extremely proficient user of the Vitritectian magic, Fusion, as their leader. Yet, here in Scarleland, Phisano saw constructs far beyond his reckoning and skill, though thankfully none beyond his imagination. In his line of work, skills could be learned. Imagination was instinctive. Happy to be within the relative safety of the city, and hopefully beyond the reach of his sandy stalker, Phisano sought a guide to the unfamiliar settlement and hoped to meet with Bromum, or at the very least, the city's chief user. Finding a friendly face, though, proved more difficult than expected, as the faces of all the residences seemed to be frozen in perpetual scowls, jeers, and other such expressions of anger and disdain. Phisano was already regretting coming here, as the atmosphere was entirely unwelcoming compared to his home of Videntia, where everyone oft-smiled. However, he had a mission here in Scarleland, and the Scarlish played an essential role in his dream. He pushed on. Phisano scanned the myriad buildings and felt the constant beaming of red light, channeled through the glass, hit his eyes without rest. Suddenly, power surged through him. An insatiable urge to destroy bubbled inanely in his subconscious. A cloud passed lazily across the sun, and the feeling passed. Phisano looked up. To his reckoning, he had about 40 seconds before the sun burnt away the cloud, and shone again upon his unguarded eyes. Scrambling for any materials he could use, Phisano saw a malleable stick lying buried in the sand. He grabbed the stick and gently bent it to the curve of his large head, then crept towards his mount, grazing unaware on the nearby patch of grass. The creature squeaked as Phisano plucked feather after feather from its side, until he held 10 of them in his right hand. Now it was time for the tricky part. Until the sunlight pierced its grey, cloudy concealer, he was powerless. So he had to be ready. 10. Phisano held the feathers against the stick. 9. He arranged them to form a layer of material extending from the curve. 8. He waited. 6 more seconds passed. Their pace was agonizingly slow. 3, 2, 1. Phisano braced himself in the last second. The sun edged out from behind the clouds, and as fast as his hairy, deft hands would allow, Phisano focused his touch on each feather as his people's magic coursed through him into the headpiece he was forging. He fused the 6 feathers to the stick, before the red gleam hit his eyes once more, and heat filled his mind and body again, threatening to possess him. He blocked the agitating rays with his makeshift cap, and thanked his proficiency in his craft. He exhaled, and heard a familiar clip-clap right behind him. Again, he scanned the area, keeping the feathered brim of his new cap low. To no avail. Nothing caught his eye. Shivering, he pressed on into the city proper. When the glass construct surrounded him, the red rays felt suddenly less intense, and he dared to raise his head as a successful querent must. Immediately, any prospect of discussing his plans with Bronum was to be discarded, as Phisano heard a local crier tell of his absence in an aggressive and excitable tone, as was commonplace here. Phisano approached the crier, with two questions battling for answers within his heat-ragged mind. "Sir, you know of the local news and such like, do you not?" Phisano asked, minding his manners, as he always did when meeting someone new. The crier turned to him, agitated. "What's with the posho chap, pal? What are you after? The local skinny, is it?" he said. He spoke far less eloquently than Phisano did by a large margin. "Yes, lad. I've come from Videntia with ideas for a project most exciting. But in order to pursue this, I need help from a fuser of great renown, or at least a dyer." The crier looked at him blankly. He looked back, sighed, and spoke again. "I'm here to talk to a fuser or a dyer about a project I'm working on. Can you help me?" Understanding dawned upon the crier. An enormous smile spread across his face. No wonder he's the crier of a gob like that, Phisano thought to himself. The people here look angry even when they're smiling. The young man walked away, gesturing behind him for Phisano to follow. He did so. Another thought came to his mind as they were walking the crimson streets of Scarleland. "You wouldn't happen to know of any creatures roaming the wastes, would you? Ones that are adept at camouflage?" he asked, hoping the crier could enlighten him. "You sure, Vanta?" he said, aghast. "And you're still here and all? How'd you manage that, then?" This response did not bode well for Phisano's nerves, as Scarleland was only the first stop upon his laborious journey. He turned to the crier, who had stopped and was looking at him now in awe, and spoke. "I saw nothing. Rather, I heard a soft squelching sound pursuing me the moment I left my home," he said, hoping to gather more information. The crier now became a desperate type of angry. "And where's that, then? Videntia? You're green. But you can't be the green, can you?" Phisano looked at him, now with the most confusion he had experienced to date. "I am green, yes, lad, but what are you talking about? The green?" he asked the crier. "There's an old saying here. The green shall flee across the sand, Vanta in tow. Defeat the eight-limbed one he will, and united the tribes will glow." He recited this as a sage would an old legend, if with a hint of irony mixed in. Phisano stared, awestruck. "I've never heard that one before, but prophecy is often hokum, lad." He lied as he spoke, for he had heard the rhyme before, and spent many uneasy nights pondering its meaning. It was more inspiration to him now than rhyme. "Nah, you ain't the green. Just some posher greenish suit," the crier said. "You're alright, though," he quickly added. They moved on, and the crier took Phisano through the city. To his left, right, and in front of him, beautiful buildings of glass in every shade of red sprang from the ground. The fusers here had been busy. As Phisano gazed between the marvellous crimson structures, his gaze briefly caught the sight of a strange, shadowy-looking figure, smaller in stature than the average Vitritect, and hairless too, moving silently behind him. Double-taking, he looked behind him, alarmed, only to glimpse a cloak disappearing behind a corner, its owner vanishing with it. Unnerved, Phisano nervously adjusted his collar and continued on. After what Phisano would have called a decent walk, they came to an ornate building of rouge glass. On each wall, there bore a beautiful snowflake, raindrop, or other incarnations of weather. Being transparent, Phisano could see through the building, 4 stories high, past a large quantity of workers running back and forth from models to sketching desks. Atop, a mosaic fresco made from many reds, in the shape of what the crier claimed was the so-called Vanta. In Phisano's opinion, the creature looked quite cephalopeic, but biology certainly wasn't his expertise, and it could have been closer to a myriapode for all he knew. Upon its head sat what appeared to be a crown, and in each tenacular arm it held items of significance to the Scarlefish. Phisano returned his gaze to ground level, and saw the crier holding his hand out expectantly. He sighed. "Never a nice deed for its own sake with you Reds, is there?" he said, as he searched his body for spare change. "Indeed there is not, sir," said the crier, as the change fell into his open hands. When the last coin hit his fleshy paw, and almost before, he sped off, shouting to the rest of the town about a green in Scarleland. Phisano sighed again, and turned to the building in front of him. The red center of fusion and dying, it said on the door. With one last nervous glance around him, he pushed the doors open.